Hey everybody, this is Sam from Out of the Armchair Podcast. We sat down with Aaron Mishler this weekend, me and Calvin did, and we had a really great conversation. Unfortunately, we had tried to set up two omnidirectional mics, which, turned out to be a mistake. We got a lot of feedback on both mics, so it kind of sounds like the voices are echoing a little bit. So I just want to preface the video a little bit so you guys had a pre-warning to what you might expect. But the conversation was so great that I didn't want to lose it, and I didn't want to just delete the whole thing. It's about an hour and a half long. We covered free speech, politics on the right and the left, quite a few subjects. We tried to kind of stick to the free speech issue, though, that got the conversation started in the first place. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys watch this. I just wanted to let you know that, the audio, we're working on getting separate mics for everybody, so everybody's got their own boom arm, and we don't have this problem in the future. So we are stepping our game up quite a bit, thanks to you guys and the support you've shown. So without further ado, here is the free speech conversation between me, my co-host Calvin, and our good friend Aaron Mishler. Enjoy. And we're live. This is Sam from Out of the Armchair Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Calvin. You guys all met him before. And our good friend Aaron. Before we get started today, I want to remind you guys to go down there and click that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. And if you like what you see here, it'll help keep you up to date on what we're doing as far as video content, questions, conversations, and all that. Also, check out our Facebook page, Out of the Armchair Podcast. Help you keep in touch with us even more. So we started this conversation the other day about free speech, and we put out a video just a couple days ago, I think you've seen, where Calvin actually took video from working in his truck, addressing the issue of free speech on Thanksgiving Day. That was great footage, by the way, thank you. And so I just kind of went over the top of it and added a couple points to it, and Aaron came with a really great response for that, and I think at that point I thought, yeah, we probably ought to sit down and have this conversation about what our ideas about free speech is. So again, we're not here trying to disprove each other or, have any disgruntled conversations. We're all about civil discourse here at out of the Armchair. So, let's get to it. Aaron, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done?
Sure. My name's Aaron. I'm a nurse. I'm a corrections nurse, actually, which as it works. In the past, I ran for office a couple times, most recently for Township Board, 2016 for County Coroner. I've done some international disaster relief work in West Africa and Haiti, as well as stateside in Puerto Rico and Houston and all that. So, yeah, just trying to fight the good fight.
So what was that like visiting different countries and seeing the different cultures over there? I mean,
it's eye-opening in a lot of ways. It makes you realize how good you have things here. When you can go drive down a paved street that has electricity for the stoplights, and then you can go home and flush a toilet and drink the water. Stuff like that you can't necessarily do in these developing nations. And, to go there and see how these people thrive sometimes under these circumstances, and then come home and you see people complaining because their cell phone doesn't have service or their Wi-Fi.
Totally first world problem.
Exactly, and it helps put stuff in perspective. And I think a lot of folks should have that experience.
Yeah, I did some disaster work after Katrina and before that, and some of the previous hurricanes with the young guy. It was just life changing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
It really is.
Never done that out of the country. That sounds extra fun.
The most involved, I've ever been is, I ran a nonprofit, which is a really great experience for me as well. And I think that's kind of how we met, actually. How we, I think, formally introduced to each other. Yeah, it was. I think you were doing some work with the Democratic Party, and I stumbled into a meeting, and we kind of exchanged info and became friends on Facebook, and then over time been kind of building this conversation relationship, if you want to call it that.
And I just have to say, in all of these conversations, several online conversations, Aaron's had some of the smartest comments that I've seen. I haven't agreed with all of them, but they've all been thoughtful and smart, and I thought he was really worth talking to. So
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, so let's talk about the videos first, so we can kind of preface the situation for some of those people who didn't happen to catch those videos. So the video is actually on our page. If you go back after this episode and check it out, should be right down there somewhere in one of those links. It's Calvin and Sam talk about free speech, I think.
And under that is the response video that Aaron posted, right?
Yeah, I think that's on the Facebook page.
Yeah,
That's on Facebook is where he posted his video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So also go there, like the page, so you can check out Aaron's response and what brought us here today. So, okay, so Calvin, why don't you just reiterate some of the things that you were kind of talking about in the video that you put out, and then because it's kind of how it laid out is, we kind of aired your video, and then I kind of added a couple points to it, and then Aaron had a really great response. So let's kind of travel down that road.
Yeah. So I was just talking. I got thinking because Sam had posted some comments on the Facebook page, and it had some good conversation, and then it got me thinking for a week, and I started thinking about how Thanksgiving, in a strange way, has something to do with free speech, which is that the Pilgrims were fleeing persecution. They were fleeing censorship. They were fleeing the inability to express themselves and their ideas. And I'd never thought of Thanksgiving in that way. So I kind of expanded on that and how often when we have the free speech conversation, it goes off into protecting speech that we all wish we didn't have to protect. And I was thinking about how there's so many positive sides to it. And I got talking about how the gay rights movement, the trans rights movement, other movements have relied on free speech to get their messages out there. So that's kind of the thoughts I had. I don't know if there was more that I can't remember, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah, well, I thought one of the great talking points when it comes to free speech was how you brought up the transgender movement. Like, there's a lot to be talked about there, and there's a lot of conversation happening.
And there's a lot to still be solved.
Right.
Like, I think all of us here at this table want to see trans people have wonderful lives.
Right, and
But
Definitely.
if we got down into the weeds of the biology of how to define it, blah blah blah, we'd probably have 4 different opinions, because I have at least 2 for myself on everything. And these things won't get worked out unless people are open to talk about it. I've had conversations even online where people are like, well, asking that question is hate speech, and it's like, no, it's a real question. People have questions. You can't expect people to pretend that their natural questions don't exist. And the gay rights movement went through that, and finally in the 90s they got a message together that the community agreed on and that the public could understand. And everybody that studies it in detail knows that the story of gay rights is far more complicated than just a simple narrative, but the simple narrative gives everybody a basis. And we don't have that yet for trans rights, seemingly.
right. I think, like you said, I think we want to be headed in that direction. I think coexistence is the primary goal, I think.
Shout out to another podcast. Thaddeus Russell has a great podcast, the Unregistered podcast, I think it is. And he just had a guy on talking about the gay rights movement and gays in the military and on and on and on. But talking about like the homophile movement in the 1950s and soldiers coming back from World War II that were gay and had figured it out during the war. And imagine back in the 1950s, these guys were marching in front of the White House. Talk about hate speech. I mean, that was totally unacceptable. And these were veterans frequently doing it in uniform and on and on and on. And thank goodness they had First Amendment right to do it, and it pushed the conversation forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I pointed out on my end of the video was, if we start restraining free speech, like, what are we actually losing at that point? We're not only losing, I guess what you would consider hate speech, right, or any other kind of rhetoric speech that would be used in a negative way. Like, we're not only losing that, but we're losing the opportunity to actually integrate the good ideas that come from these subcultures into our society, so we can all coexist, as one species.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where I think the goal is with this conversation is trying to get to that point.
And
Because he pushed back on the whole thing, and so I want to give him a second to kind of explain his position because it's a unique. And it's brought up. It's a unique position, and it's brought up quite often. Actually,
Yeah, I hear his position all the time. I want to make one last point before we move on here. Is that one of the things that struck me when I was thinking about the Pilgrim's experience with free speech is that often the idea of being a persecutor is something that nobody thinks they'll ever be. But if you look at where the Church of England was with the Pilgrims, they were the good people. They were the educated people. They were the smart people. And they were the ones doing the persecution. They were the ones doing the censorship. It wasn't bad people. These weren't people that were, skinheads. They weren't the outcasts of society. This was the powerful, the moral, the religious, literally the Oxford. Literally.
the one that's not highlighted with the bad marker, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And we somehow have this cartoonish idea that the only people that will limit is the people that are outcasts, that should be outcasts, and clearly the people that were censoring the Pilgrims thought they were doing a good thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, those are definitely some valid points, and you have to consider the historical context definitely when it comes to things like the Pilgrims and free speech. And I hadn't actually considered that with Thanksgiving. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a perspective that I'd never considered. What I brought up in my video was something called the paradox of tolerance, which basically states that the longer that you become tolerant of the intolerable, eventually the intolerable will destroy those who tolerated them in the past.
That's right.
And there's some historical precedent to that as well when it comes to fascist Spain, fascist Italy, fascist Germany, Soviet Union, communist China, all those various extreme left and right regimes where you may have necessarily had people who tolerated them at first and in the end were, purged by the various regimes and things like that. So I think there needs to be some kind of balance because obviously in the United States, the First Amendment applies to a lot of things, but there's a few things that you can't do. You can't call out violence for people and verbally threaten people, things like that aren't protected speech. And at what point does it shift from hate speech to threats? At what point does it change from just yelling racial slurs to lighting crosses on fire?
Well, that's actually not speech.
Exactly. But some would say that that's a protected, speech as well. And you also have people of various minority groups, gays, Jews, Catholics, African Americans, they have the right, I feel, to live their life without fear. And where does that fall into free speech? If you're allowing these, extremist organizations to march and chant and, Jews will not replace us and things like that, Charlottesville, actions like that, at what point does it become unsafe for these people in their, pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness and things like that? And I think that's something that needs to be, examined and discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a great point. I guess I would have to go with, I think we're still primitive in a lot of ways, in the way we think about things and our approach. We've been making mistakes for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
One of the inside jokes that Sam and I always use is we're just chimps figuring it out.
Yeah, we're all just chimps trying to figure it out,
We're just hydrogen that's hung out for a long time,
I like that one. Yeah. So, and I think, okay, so I guess here's the where I guess I would raise an issue is by what other mechanism do we have as a species to be able to, disseminate these ideas? And I mean, so a lot of times, and I think I brought this up to Calvin before, and I actually was in the video that we couldn't bring up, so I'll just cover that real quick. So a lot of times you see, and not necessarily you or you, but when you bring up this free speech thing, all of a sudden you have this, Nazis, slavery, all these things that we've already talked about basically as a society, and I think generally, like, we understand that these are bad ideas, right?
Yeah.
And they have no traction.
Hopefully, they
Yeah,
understand.
yeah. Well, it would seem. I like to think that in general, people are good people. You know what I mean? And so,
even in the U.S., 99% of people understand that, no question.
yeah. And so it's just kind of like, well, if we know that these ideas are bad ideas, they're never going to be platformed again. But then again, and that's kind of what stuck me with what you said was, okay, but they are being platformed in certain areas, right? But there seems to be this duality with it where we're deplatforming, intellectuals from talking at universities, for the same causes almost, all over free speech and what hate speech is and what microaggression is. And it's like, 20 years ago, we didn't have that issue necessarily, right?
Right.
The good conversations that needed to be happening were happening in the places they needed to be happening. And now because they're being pushed out of the universities, now they're on more public stages like theaters and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean...
And clearly when people feel like these ideas can't be discussed, I think it actually causes more people to go out and march. And we see this all across Poland and Germany and countries that have hate speech where it's not like they don't have Nazis, they have more Nazis. Because people, it's like conspiracy theories. When you can't talk about something, people are like, see, you can't discuss the Holocaust. I mean, Poland has an incredible neo-Nazi population, and all across southern Soviet Union and Bulgaria and places like this. And they have hate speech laws, and they've got laws where Holocaust denied can send you to prison, and people are doing it, by huge chunks of the population because now it's like UFOs. And people think the fact you can't discuss them proves that we're hiding something. So sometimes I think that by being able to discuss something, you should, like if you listen to an interview by Richard Spencer, it takes about 5 minutes to go, this guy is a Fruit Loop. Like, it doesn't take a very good thinker to dismantle his argument. It doesn't.
No, it's pretty.
It's a bad argument. So I want people to hear his argument because it's so shitty that they'll go, wow, that's even worse than I thought.
Well, and I think one of the things that was brought up with this is how the type of speech that Aaron's referring to has the power and the ability to radicalize people in a way that maybe we hadn't seen before.
Right.
But then I always have to raise the question of there's for anything that you have, there's a price to pay. And as hard as that may be to say, especially with some certain situations, like my beliefs on civil liberties and how passionate I feel about them. Right. So in no way am I saying that we should go ahead and let radicals be radicals because it's going to happen anyways. I mean, they have to be contained. Something's got to be done about them, obviously. And but I would also venture to say that because those guys in Charlottesville, wasn't it? Okay, because they had that platform. I mean, they were very, very quickly shut down in general, very quickly. Like they have no merit at this point because that was
discredited.
Right, they were discredited because of that platform.
Well, at the same time, I think you brought up 20 years ago. You wouldn't hear this a whole lot. Well, 20 years ago, technology was a lot different than it is now.
That's a fair point.
There wasn't YouTube. There wasn't podcasts for this to be a thing. I think the organizer for Charlottesville, he's been famously renowned now as the crying Nazi. After he lost all his jobs and everything like that, he does his own podcast now and is bouncing through various forms of cryptocurrency in order to be paid and things like that. But I also think
so he's been what you're saying though is that he's essentially been forced to the fringes of society.
He has, but we also need to remember that someone was killed at Charlottesville.
Yeah.
One person.
Yes, and that hadn't been a thing for a long time. It's been a long time since.
But we're saying that 10%
well,
of the number of people that are struck by lightning twice got killed at Charlottesville.
True, but I don't think we should, discredit it either.
No, I don't think so either.
And
we overrate terrorism and
definitely.
events like this, and sometimes I think that we have to step back and say, okay, that's scary and a problem, but is this something to panic about? We had a 1 in 300,000 chance in 10 years of getting killed by Nazis. Let's really worry about that.
Well, for me, it's a little different. I'm Jewish, so when I see you know, the rise of extreme right wing. When I see, you know, Nazis marching down the streets of Charlottesville chanting "Jews will not replace us with their little, you know, Home Depot tiki torches and things like that. It's hard to
Home Depot tiki torches.
That's what made it so funny.
It kind of is.
It's liking of you.
Yeah.
I love the Aryan power here.
Look, if you're gonna march about something, get some real freaking torches. Robert torches.
Yeah.
You know, you see stuff like that, and
I lose the beer guts.
exactly. Come on now, with the polos. Come on.
Got your suspender zone.
It's yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Anyways, go ahead.
I also think a point I brought up was generally in conversations like we're having now. You know, you give information and you get information, and when it comes to extreme right wing, you know, anti-Semitism, fascism, things like that, there's nothing generally to gain from the conversation. Like you mentioned, you only have to listen to Richard Spencer for 5 minutes or so before realizing that he's insane. And whatever you say to him, he's not going to care about because he's pretty well entrenched in his beliefs. So I don't necessarily know if there's any benefit in having a conversation with these people because you're giving them more of a platform to radicalize some people who might listen to them, people who might feel disenfranchised and pick up on some of what they're saying. Maybe they just lost their jobs and, you know, there's some anti-immigrant rhetoric from, you know, the far right might strike their attention. And I think, was it LBJ said, you know, it doesn't matter, something about voters, like if you could get him to believe someone, you know, a black guy was taking his job or something like that, then he'll vote for you, you know, no matter what you say about, you know, social programs and things like that. It's the misplaced blame that I think a lot of people have, and that you know, extreme ideology gives them, that it's not your fault you lost your job. It's not mechanization. It's those immigrants who came across, or it's those, you know, Jewish globalists who, you know, own the banks and things like that.
Which is like a very thin slice of our population.
Exactly. But you're still giving them that platform because you know they're not going to listen to anything you say. But they're not trying to have a conversation with you when they say these things. They're speaking past you. They're speaking to the fringes, the disenfranchised, the people who they want to recruit and, you know, arm and indoctrinate and things like that. Which is why it's dangerous, in my opinion, to give them these platforms.
Evidence-wise, though, does it work? Because in Eastern Europe, where we've had these laws, we have much, much, much larger and more powerful neo-Nazi groups than we do here.
I don't know.
Well,
by many times, though. I mean, that's just the thing.
Well, and the other thing I want to bring up is
I mean, we got soccer hooligans in Eastern Europe. That's totally a thing, and anti-Semitism is a part of that.
we have to remember that it's not just, because you mentioned the right quite a few times, that it's not just the right. As a matter of fact, the situations I was mentioning before, where there's intellectuals being deplatformed at universities, that's mainly coming from the left. And I feel like, you know, I completely disagree with that. Okay, I mean, it's obvious. You know, no respectable university is going to platform somebody who is actually propagated hate speech. I mean, there's certain filters that have to happen there. And what's dangerous is when you deplatform those conversations in the universities, you no longer have that filter. And then you have guys like Pangburn Philosophy who went out and interviewed Nazis just to understand. Oh, we're just going to interview them to understand how they think and where they're coming from. Well, we know that. We already know those things. You know what I mean? And it was a ridiculous. I urge you to check it out. You know, go and check it out. It was a ridiculous conversation.
Travis is completely earned his welcome and and full free fall right now.
We won't get into that too much, but
there's a whole lot.
So this is kind of I may be moving a little bit away from free speech here, but this has kind of been my political narrative lately. And I'm sure you've heard me say it before several times that democracy requires a conversation. And what's going on now is because of blocking free speech on this side, blocking free speech on this side, right? That both sides have become so defensive that nobody's willing to sit down and have a conversation that needs to be had anymore. I mean, I don't know how to get us back there, but I know I have this great need to get us there. And I think free speech is one of the greatest tools we have because, I mean, you know, like I said earlier, like what other mechanism do we have as a civilization, as a society, as a culture, to be able to navigate these ideas? Like there's no other mechanism. I can't think of one. I mean, I'm not going to be the smartest guy in the world, right? Maybe there's a big think tank computer we just dump our ideas into, and it can, come up with some algorithm that says, "Oh, yeah, this is the best way for human species." But it's pretty far off. Elon Musk, get on that. But moving forward, I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is this is the tool that we have, and I think it's the only good tool that we have that actually works. And it may not work all the time, but I think the efficacy is there. I mean, without this way of thinking, how could the Enlightenment values happen? I mean, the left. You asked me on the podcast, the one we did together about why I identify with the left, and I gave a shitty answer.
I popped that on you.
Yeah, you did. I was like, wait, I was going somewhere else. But I identify with the left because they primarily operate on Enlightenment values.
Right.
And I'm super pro Enlightenment.
Me too.
Reason, logic, rationality. You know what I mean? So that would be probably the major reason.
Do you identify with the Enlightenment strongly? I'm just curious. Because I'm about to ask you something with the John Stuart Mill quote and see how you respond.
I generally do. I think I identified a lot with the concept of the social contract that we as Americans have with each other.
That's a beautiful idea.
The beginning of the preamble of the Constitution, that in order to form a more perfect union, and I think that's what we as a society, as Americans, need to strive for, is a more perfect union. Which
I love that when Obama would talk about that.
Exactly. Why our Constitution has amendments. Why it's not, why I consider it a living document and not something to be considered, as written 300 years ago with 3/5 of a person and ludicrous things like that.
Yeah, I think Joe Rogan said, if Thomas Jefferson came here today, he'd be like, "Are you guys still seriously operating on that shit? Yeah. Like, this was the beginning. Like, you're still like following this by the letter?" I mean, I think you're right. It's kind of,
and I think a lot of our political,
but we agree on a lot. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I just want to keep going back to and retouching is we agree on so much here.
Well, there's a lot of merit, I think, to your point, and I don't have the answer for that, right?
And I don't either.
Yeah, I think, it may be something that just has to happen in order for ideas. I mean, because we tend to look at things, and I think this is part of the problem too, and maybe a small part of the problem.
Like, we give up a lot of safety for like our rights against search and seizure. We just let cops kick in doors whenever they wanted. We could be safer. We could save hundreds of lives a year, not just one life from a Nazi. So, I mean, all of our constitutional rights cost us lives, every single one of them.
Right, and now you made me forget what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think free speech is a big part of the engine of democracy. I think it's a big part of trying to progress into a more enlightened stage for just the human species in general. Oh, what I was going to say is, I think a lot of people look at this problem, again, because of our primate brains, like, we only tend to see things in the scope of 72 years or so, you know what I mean? And so that's basically, I mean, without having a very in-depth knowledge of history, global history, right? It's like you have these tools, basically, people who just graduate from high school, drop out of high school, like you're average, but I consider to be an average person.
Let's face it, college graduates don't know history.
Yeah, you got to pick up your own book. But I guess what I'm saying is, we only have this span of time, and it seems to be this lens that we look at things through, and then we don't look at them fully. You know what I mean? So it kind of, I think we're constrained in that way, and that kind of moves some of the biases on both sides of this argument.
No, I definitely agree. To touch back on the technology thing I mentioned earlier, I think we not only need to look into history, but into the future as well when it comes to technology and how it relates to these radicals as well. I know currently in this area, a lot of jobs are in manufacturing. As technology continues to move forward, automation is going to take more and more jobs. I think Lippert is working on a completely automated factory, or near automated, that would otherwise have a lot of workers in it. When more of these factories turn to automation, who's going to help these workers? Are they, going to be unemployed? And when you're unemployed, that's when you start to get angry, you start to place blame, and that's when these Richard Spencers and these other folks move in. And I think we need to figure out a way as a society, either universal guaranteed income or continued.
We had this problem 120 years ago.
Exactly, or better job training, things like that, to help shift these workers into other fields. Or we're going to have a lot of unemployed.
That's what you'll fix still. But it's the same problem.
Yeah, how can we do that?
Well, we've seen this problem already arise here in Elkhart, right, in the RV industry, where like as technology grew, the people who were building the RVs, when I first started in RVs, I've been in RVs for 20 years, okay, almost my entire career has been in the RV industry in one way or another. And so when technology jumped up, you start seeing these new lighting systems. They got PCs in them, and now we're putting the internet in them, and these guys, they didn't know how to do that stuff. You know what I mean? And I would say it was probably right after the recession we kind of started regaining back from the recession again. But it was like we left a bunch of people behind, and now here we are. What are we? 10 years later, or
about
12 years, 10, 12 years since it first happened. Now we're just now starting to open up these institutes, like these RV Technology Institute, I think it's called. And, this should have been very, very obvious.
Back to the 1700s, the story of technology, workers get left behind, workers catch up, technology, workers get left behind, workers get,
I don't know many people who are blacksmiths,
Right.
Yeah, or guys that mine coal by hand.
Sure, but I guess I don't know how we got here from free speech, but I guess in those situations it would seem like we say we look back in history and learn, but obviously we don't, because we keep having these technology jumps. We know we're having. Like it was obvious when you were able to hold Google in your hand that we were about to experience something we've never experienced before, and so. Talking about smartphones, I'd like to bring that up too, because you kind of touched on the information highway that we have going on today.
Yeah, expand on that. Expand on your ideas about technology, because I think we're going somewhere interesting.
So, just so let me preface that a little bit, because the way I've kind of looked at it is kind of how it was Elon Musk and Joe Rogan that kind of talked about it a little bit. About we have this influx of information that we're not used to, and our brains aren't built to withstand over long periods of time. Basically, our bandwidth is too small to process all the information we have. And so that's leading to a lot of disillusion in people, mental illnesses, the rise in suicide. Jessica could probably touch on that with numbers pretty well. But, there's a free speech problem there, too. That's causing a lot of that disillusion. It's causing a lot of that mental illness. That the anti-bullying thing that's online, the whole online anti-bullying thing. So, I think there is something to talk about how we can guard our communities from that happening to them in some way. And I guess that would spread off to a larger population, I guess.
I think educating the youth in how to the youths in how to handle this information at a young age, because my nieces and nephews, and even my own daughter, she's 3, she knows how to get on my phone and go to YouTube Kids and watch videos and things like that. And being able to sit down and have conversations with kids on how necessarily what you see on the internet might not be true, just because you read it, that sort of thing. Giving them kind of the critical thought to understand what they're reading, understand what they're doing, I think is very important as a society to address, both as from parents and from school corporations, things like that. I think that fact checking and knowing what sources might have bias and things like that, while researching papers, things like that.
Which that's increasingly hard to do these days.
It is.
To find a good source of real information.
There's ways. There's Google Scholar, there's peer-reviewed studies and things like that you can go to that are very
But
boring.
if we don't have free speech in the university, certain things aren't getting studied. That's clearly a problem that we have.
True. I mean, on the right, you have them, shutting down things like stem cell research, things like that, and on the left,
Which I have a big problem with. Like, I have diabetes, right? So, stop it.
Yeah,
Let us use some damn stem cells. I mean, people. Let me get on a tangent here, because what people don't understand about stem cells, right? They think that they're like sucking this out of the spinal cords of babies, aborted babies, by extreme leftists and Satanists, right? And that's just not the case. What's happening is an embryonic labs, right? Okay, so you have a woman who wants to go and get pregnant, so they create they take a myriad of eggs, right, and then they try to inject them with the sperm. So then they have these embryos that are not going to make it. They're not going to do anything with it. They have the one that they're put back in the mother, right? But they just, they're literally throwing these things away, and it just seems like such a shame. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, that we couldn't use that in some scientific medical advancement,
And in some cases, the stem cells are just being grown off populations, petri dishes that they were literally decades.
Well, I think that was the last big thing I seen them crying about. Catholics raised this big deal about them using the leftover embryos from embryo labs, basically. And I thought, now how ridiculous is that? It's like saying, hey, don't throw that paper out. Somebody might want to write or draw a beautiful picture on that one day. But they're not.
Yeah.
You should definitely listen to the podcast. It's wearing melodic death metal T-shirts about how we're not into death and killing babies.
Right. So anyway, back to free speech. I'm sorry, tangent over. Okay. So where were we at before I went off on that?
Were we talking about technology? Expand on your thoughts there, and then I want to get back to the John Stuart Mill quote at some point.
Okay, all right.
We forgot completely about that. No.
I was just mentioning earlier how we need to prepare ourselves for automation and how we're going to deal with these workers who may become unemployed, and how we're going to either train them or we're going to provide some kind of income for them. Because if we don't, these extremists on either side of the aisle will recruit.
And by then, we're talking about him and I.
Literally.
And there's movements toward automated truck driving.
Exactly.
Things like that.
I'm well aware of that.
And
I just bought my own truck to try to prepare for that, just in case.
Oh. Wow. So what do we do with that? And also going back to the we need to educate our kids, educate the next generation on understanding bias and
critical thinking
skills. Exactly.
Very, very. Yeah, and one of the things I always say about our house is we don't teach what to think, we teach how to think. So there's certain topics that we don't discuss here. I kind of wait for them to hey, what's this about, Dad?
And you're like,
I'm like, yes. So this is what this is about. This is what I think it's about. You can go and look up some, your own answers. So yeah, critical thinking and teaching kids how to, look at information and decide what's good information, what's bad information. I think that's extremely, extremely important. And something that we haven't done in our culture at all. We've been our parents kind of told us, listen to them in school because that's right. And then you get to college and figure out that Columbus was right.
Yeah,
all the neat stuff you find out when you grow up. So,
and you're right. There is a huge difference between 50 years ago when to get information out in the public, usually with a book or TV or radio. TV and radio was highly regulated, highly centralized. You had to be part of the intelligence. You had to get on there. To get a book published, you had to go through a publisher.
Look at the Turner publisher.
It was incredible. And now any moron with a microphone can do what I'm doing. So you're right. There's a huge difference.
Look at Timothy McVeigh in the 90s. He was radicalized just by reading the Turner Diaries, right? And Ruby Ridge and all that stuff that I won't get into. But if he was alive today, he would have so many more opportunities besides that book to become radicalized. He can just go on the computer and go to Stormfront. And suddenly, any fringe ideas he might have will be reinforced by people who believe the same thing. And
it gives these groups a place to collect and start discussing their own bad ideas.
Exactly.
How do you feel about Okay, so we're talking about radicalization on the radical right. How do you feel about radicalization in the Islamic world and the Christian world? I mean, this starts to get really iffy if we actually are consistent about this.
Well,
And the body count's much bigger from religious violence. There's just no doubt.
I'm not sure about that. I think right-wing terrorists in the United States have killed more in the past 10 or 15 years than, radical Islamists or Christians in the United States. I might be wrong, but I do think the number is higher for
If you included the Western world, you would be wrong. For sure.
Well, and that's also operating on a time constraint.
just specifically the United States.
Yeah, just the time constraint and the geographical constraint. So, I mean, that may be true. I mean, again, we have to see.
3,500 at 9/11 would be hard to account for.
Yeah, but you also had, Oklahoma City bombing that happened just a few years.
140.
More than that, I thought.
I've been there.
Was
I
that?
don't know the number off the top, but it wasn't a big number. It was under 300. I know.
I think that when it comes zealotry in any form is dangerous, be it
Absolutely.
political or religious. I don't. I mentioned earlier I'm Jewish. I don't agree with the, radical, zealots in the West Bank who are building settlements and stuff there.
Exactly.
I don't think that's right, and I don't believe in the Wahhabi Islam coming out of Saudi Arabia and everything like that. I think those are both dangerous ideas. Just the other day, there was a Christian missionary that got shot with arrows to death because he was trying to proselytize to some tribesmen in some island off India. So
Yeah, but that dude. I mean, come on. Like, okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I'm not gonna put any religious bias on this or anything. Okay, but here's the thing: is if you go to Sentinel Island, you know about Sentinel Island. Like, I live in Elkhart, Indiana. I know about the Sentinels. I would never go to their island. Like, you can sit on YouTube. We just sat here and talked about how this information is so open. It's all right there. But then this guy goes over there, and I mean, what the hell were you?
Didn't they have aerial footage? So somebody was there with a helicopter to watch.
It was a fisherman. It was the fisherman watched. Like the fisherman, I don't know. He got mad.
Dropped them off or something?
Yeah, and then he got mad because they threw an arrow at him. So he left. I don't know the exact. I don't claim to know the whole
they tried to
details
warn
on it.
him, so that's nice.
Well, the guy was already on the island. So the fisherman that took him over there, right? Apparently, the fisherman got mad because they were throwing arrows at him. Well, yeah. I mean, you're a fisherman in the area. You knew that was going to happen. So then they left it. They left the guy there. And it comes back, I think it's the next day or maybe an hours later or something like that, and they watched them bury the guy on the beach. So it's kind of like, here's the thing, is he violated Indian law there. You know what I mean? Like I said, I'm here in Elkhart, Indiana, and I know not to go to that island. You'd have to be an idiot to go there. So I'm sorry that he lost his life, but to me, I mean, you're kind of asking for it if you put yourself in those situations.
Yeah, I think martyrdom is sometimes part of that missionary mindset that we do.
It's clearly part of it.
Well, okay, so, I mean, and that's where I think religion becomes dangerous. I mean, you have ideas that you hold on to, and the same thing we're talking about with right and left, right? Because a lot of the problem, I think, in the miscommunication of the right and left is that people hold on to their ideas and they identify through them. They use them for even on the right, they use them for their own identity. They say, well, this is my take on things and this is who I am. But that's just not the case. Like, ideas change as you mature and as you grow.
They should.
They should. They absolutely should. And if they don't, you're probably useless. So, but in a rational human being, okay, ideas do not make up who you are. I mean, there are things that you think, and they have your cultural biases attached to them. They have, maybe the way your parents treated you when you grew up attached to them. Right. So, but they're not exactly who you are as a person. When people try to hold those things so close, and then you go to scrutinize it, that's what causes all this tension and all this aggression between one another. Because it's just like, okay, you get the same reaction with left and right, right? From either side. If it's like if I go into a believer and start trying to scrutinize their ideas, I don't care what belief system, Islam, Christian Catholicism, whatever it is. And I go in and I start trying to scrutinize their ideas and I get pissed, Right? We've seen it 1,000 times. I mean, you see it all over. Whenever an atheist opens his mouth, there's sure to be a believer there to say, you know. But anyways, and it's like these people think that we can't scrutinize these ideas. And I think that's a dangerous, dangerous path to walk. Because then you're so tied to it, you know, to the idea that you're willing to carry it out to the very end. And what does the very end look like for these people? And you're starting to see this same type of behavior in our political culture.
I think some of that has to do
I mean, the end looks like they're Christ coming back and destroying everybody who doesn't believe what they believe and taking them to some
it's not a happy ending place. Way, you know?
Well, people tend to think so. It's funny because so then we put so, and I guess this has to do with freedom of speech. Is when you look at any Abrahamic religion, they're begging for their Messiah to come back, right? The return of the Messiah, and on that day there'll be some type of judgment, right? And everybody who falls short of that judgment has to die, go to hell, eternal damnation, whatever it may be. You don't get your 72 virgins, you know. There's no transcendence. So when you have people like that think like that, you know, openly say, "Oh, I can't wait for, you know, Jesus to come back," or whatever. That is dangerous talk to me, especially when you put people like that in charge of a country who stand behind a red button, where you're like, you know, okay, well, if you don't believe, I mean, it's essentially what that structure of that character says is, you don't believe what I believe, then I'll just take you all out because we're going to win anyways, you know, and they've got the red button to do it. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's, and it works the same way with political ideas. It works the exact same way. Like religion and politics are so tied together, it's ridiculous.
Utopian. And the problem with religion is utopianism, almost.
Yes, I can see that, but we also have a fundamental broken electoral system in the United States that only exacerbates the growing division between the left and the right, and that's the first past the post voting system, which is it completely makes third party and minor parties irrelevant because people don't want to vote for third parties because they don't want the spoiler effect that, you know, Ralph Nader had or anything like that.
I heard his name in a while.
Yeah. Shout out Ralph Nader.
Shout out Ralph Nader.
And Maine recently got past this with what's called ranked choice voting.
Yeah, but isn't that important?
Expand on that. Expand on that a little bit. What is it? Just so anybody doesn't know what that is.
Basically, you don't just vote for one candidate. You say a third-party candidate is your favorite, but you don't think he has a good chance to win. So you'll put him as number one, and then you'll put the more popular Republican or Democrat as number two. And then the third.
So the vote is more evenly spread out. So if like
and in some cases, don't you have like 3 votes that you can cast for each office, and you can put all 3 in one camp, or you can put one in each of 3 candidates or something, or you can put 2 on your favorite and 1 on the other, or whatever, and then it like recalculates it. Every time that one drops off the majority.
I don't think you should be able to put them on. I don't know the rules of this, but I don't think you should be able to put all 3 of your credits on one guy.
I'm interrupting you. I know there's a number of ways. You're the politician here. Explain that, because you probably have.
But if you can dump all 3 of your credits on, I'm not for that system. Because that's not fair.
I don't necessarily know if there's an exact. I know in Maine you only get a couple votes, and it's just 1. You could either vote for 1, I believe, or 2, but I don't think you could vote both votes on the same person. I might be wrong on that.
I would agree with that. I like that.
Because I know there's a couple different ways that I've heard professors talk about different systems, and I'm not sure which one Maine has. I know they've got one of them.
But just the most recent election in November in Maine, the Republican had slightly over like 49%, but he had the majority of the votes compared to the Democrat and the third party. But because he didn't have over 50%, they recalculated and say you picked the third party is your first choice. Well, he's not going to win, so it drops off to your second choice. And if that second choice was the Democrat, then he gets your vote now. And so this way it encourages people to pick third-party candidates who they might not have picked otherwise because they didn't want to waste a vote. And I think that's very good because it could help bridge that ideological divide that's in this country where it's my way or the highway.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I didn't know anything about that. It's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to expand on it because, you know, it works. I think that's a great system, and I think it works. But if you can cast all, like,
No,
all your
why is it in
best,
court right now? Do you know?
It's in court right now because
I heard of an interview about it the other day, and I was like, not sure what the whole story was.
the office that was won was for the federal congressional district of 2nd Maine. The argument the Republican has since he lost is that it violates the one man, one vote of the
and the
13th Amendment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's what his argument is.
It's a decent.
Yeah, it's a decent argument. So we'll see where it goes. Because at least on a state level and below, I feel like it could be up to
Has the
individual
federal court
states.
put like a stay on that yet, or anything?
No, I don't. I
It's
haven't
fascinating.
followed it that much, but I know. And voting does matter a lot. I know in Alaska right now, there's if the Democrats or Republicans control the House, is currently decided by no votes. They're tied. There's 2 candidates that are exactly tied. They're going to do a recount, and if the recount comes up the same, who controls the House in Alaska will be determined by a coin flip.
that's the rules, though.
Yeah.
I think I remember hearing something about that. Like, that's, excuse me, guys. I'm smoking, and neither one of them are smokers. It's making me very
I smoke
self-conscious.
a sometimes.
Yeah.
I need to bring it over next time.
So that's
Then I'll smoke you out.
that's a real thing. That's written. I've heard of the coin toss thing before. That's
Like,
Probably not the-
thrown to the house.
probably not
Yeah.
probably not the best technical method, but it works.
Yeah. Isn't there some case where the presidential election gets thrown to the house
If they both are tied in the electoral college, it goes to the
That's
House.
right. Then it goes to the House, and then the Speaker of the House gets to
Well, it's everyone in the House gets to vote,
Yeah.
which basically means whoever is
whoever
in
is
control.
in control and
It's the candidate, right?
That's somebody defects.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I think we kind of got off free speech there, but interesting stuff. I think where do you think we're at now, though, as far as control goes? Because it looks like to me, honestly, after all that crap I said earlier, it's looking like a one-party system at this point.
I
And
think
I think that's some of that's probably the left's fault for failing to organize a good front and coming to terms
The
with
left's not done what it should with the working class. That's
right. It hasn't done what it's done, and I think they put a very bad candidate up.
And they called the working class deplorables. I mean, that helps you win.
And not only that, but there was a lot of Sanders supporters. I mean, I was a Sanders supporter that didn't end up voting for Hillary in the general election. I didn't vote for Hillary in the general election. Well, I mean, mostly because Indiana is not a swing state, and my vote for president
But it doesn't matter anyway.
doesn't matter anyway. So I voted, actually third party for it.
Yeah.
And the left needs to focus on the working class more. I think ignoring Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and just kind of as a blue wall.
But how does that happen with a party that seems to care about everybody's ideas to the point that like they can't even pull their wave in anymore to kind of get all their sand back in their sandbox?
I can tell you locally how
Does
it
that make
happens.
sense?
Yeah. In this past election, we had 3 great candidates for the 2nd District congressional race. We had Yatish Joshi, we had Pat Hackett, and we had Mel Hall. Mel Hall won with 40% of the vote in the primary, which means 60% of Democrats voted against him in the primary. He made no effort following the primary to court these voters. He didn't even have the word Democrat on any of his literature. He was against Nancy Pelosi. He said he could support a border wall. At one of the county meetings here in Elkhart, he said the jury was still out at Trump. As far as, if
The jury's going to be out on Trump
if he
for
was
his
a-
entire presidency.
well, hopefully there will be an actual jury out on Trump at some point.
Oh, you want that?
Yeah. But he ignored the base Democrat voters. He ignored.
That's the problem the Democrats have. They
Yeah.
move so far left.
Well, and
in order to
so far, right?
court the working class, you lose. Like they're in a dilemma because if you court your Democratic base, you're not going to get the working class, and if you court the working class, you're not going to get the Democratic base. They're in a catch-22.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that one problem the Democratic Party has, at least regionally here in Indiana, is an emphasis on defeating Jackie Walewski at all costs. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of her, but I would much rather have.
I voted for her. I did. I couldn't. I don't know. I didn't like the other candidate.
Mel Hall? Yeah, he was Mel Hall.
He was subpar.
But I look.
I'm just gonna keep smiling when I look at him.
I look at what happened in Texas with Beto O'Rourke, and Texas has been a reliably conservative state. And Beto did not win in Texas. He came very close. But what he did was he helped push many Democrats in the House, in the State House, in the State Senate, judgeships, townships, all the way down to dog catcher, who normally would not have had a chance into winnable races and sometimes winning these races. And I think that here in Indiana, there's an idea that they need to move further to the right. If Mel Hall had been any further to the right, he would have been a Republican. And he didn't galvanize the base. And while that base might not have been enough to get him elected, it could have potentially got Democrats elected into down-ticket races, into township seats, and city councils, and all these things. And once those people are in a position, their constituents will realize, hey, this person can govern, they know what they're doing. This abandoning down-ticket ballots has really hurt the Democratic Party.
That started during the Obama years, with Obama, unfortunately. Yeah. Love him to death, but yeah.
And you go into a situation where you don't want to go too far left, but at the same time, you don't want to ignore building your base up either. Because when Walewski ran in 2012 and finally won, she didn't run as a moderate. She ran as a Tea Party Republican, and her base got excited. And I think that voters smell excitement. They smell desperation too. If you come off as a candidate who is a Democrat, but you're afraid to call yourself if you're mimicking your opponent's positions but wording them differently, voters are going to see that, and they're going to see that you're desperate, and they're not going to like that.
Well, and voters like me have guys like you on our page that we can rely on to go. I follow your posts, like, I don't want to use the big R word, but I follow your posts quite a bit, especially during election time, because I know that you're over there researching the facts. Yeah, you're paying attention, and it's a good source, I think. And that way, that you're another utility to the community.
But we also need to think that the base on the Democratic side isn't necessarily anti-worker. I think that the Democrats' media has spun a lot towards social issues when they need to talk about health care constantly. They need to talk about Medicare for all, which I'm a strong believer in. And they also need to push for more unionization, which I think is beneficial to all workers, even if you don't.
Well, let's face it, the unions that exist right now are shit. I mean,
they're very
both me and my girlfriend have been part of unions that completely let us down.
But I think that for some of the problems you were talking about earlier about automation, also.
But that's part of the problem, though, is that the Democrats haven't supported and helped unions modernize.
So what are the Democrats? What are the Democrats busy doing? We're talking about all the things that they're not doing. So.
What are they doing? I think one thing they're doing well is in places where they have won, they stayed out of the mud. They spoke mainly about jobs, and they spoke about infrastructure, and they spoke about healthcare. When you get bogged down into social issues, you galvanize voters. You galvanize them one way or another.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's where I was going next.
If you can...
We're filming this live in my house right now, so there's like a lot going on. My cat just ran through with, it looked like a page of stickers stuck to his ass. And the other one was chasing this page of stickers, so yeah.
He's very scared of this page of stickers. He's looking back at it.
Now the whole audience is like, man, I wish you'd have caught that on camera.
Right? Yeah. It's way more entertaining than anything we've said.
Yeah.
But I think they're in a better position than the Republican Party is right now, because the Republican Party is tied a lot to Trump right now. because they rode his coattails in 2016 a
So
lot.
what happened there? Because in the beginning, you've seen a lot of these. You've seen a,
Can you put the cat out? Help the kitty out. Still got the stickers on his tail.
yeah, there you
All
go.
right.
Okay, yeah, we're taken care of. You never know what you're going to get to see when
That's
you watch
right.
this show. So I think what was I saying? So yeah, what happened with the Republican Party? Because in the beginning it was like, they were like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy won. I mean, there's like a lot of Republicans that were like, yeah, he's not gonna last.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's his
Lindsey
name?
Graham.
Wrote that book.
Yeah.
Was it what was the guy's name? Just wrote that book. That outstood a lot of the comments that were being made.
Thousands of them.
There's been a few.
Which book?
The hell with it, I can't remember. But what happened to those guys? Like, it was like, oh no, he won. Now what?
I think that when it comes to the Republican Party, they care, at least on a federal level, a lot about tax cuts. And their main goal is, we don't care who's in, as long as we get to do our tax cuts for the rich. We want our donor base to be happy. And in order to do this, we need to take the House, the Senate, and the president. We don't like Trump, but we know whatever we send to his desk, he's going to sign. Which is why I think you have people like Lindsey Graham, who came out so strongly against him in the primaries, even after he was elected.
Paul Ryan, Ted
Paul
Cruz,
Ryan, exactly.
you name it.
Ted Cruz is just actual human Ted Cruz, right?
Fascinating guy.
Yeah. As long as they get their bills passed, they don't necessarily care who's in. And all these deplorable comments that he's been making since he's been in, going after everyone from judges to women, everything. They don't care because they're getting their votes in. And it's truly frightening that they're willing to trade their own humanity, their own morals for this. And at some point, I think the American people are going to say, enough is enough. And I think this past election...
But until Democrats stop talking down to working class people, they're going to be like, I'll go with the devil that's mean to everyone than the person that's talking down to me. And everything that the mainstream media says talks about working class people as the thems that we need to do something about, the deplorables, the people we need to fix. And it's like, these aren't the people that came up with scientific racism. No, that was you intellectuals. These aren't the people that came up with, it's not been the working class of this country that's been the problem. They weren't the slave owners. They were the people that worked on plantations. The working class people, the Trump base, they've never been in power. And I think that's something that the Democrats are missing a lot.
No, I agree. But they were the ones, they might not have been the plantation owners, but they did fight for the Confederacy.
Some of them.
Yeah. And
some of them lost sons fighting for the North, too.
That is true.
I think we have to think about the people that have no idea what they're doing either way.
Yeah.
They're just going, there's a huge, because when I look at things like this, I took business science, so I look at it as marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what pretty much what politics is. So, but you have this base of fans, right, who will go with whatever's popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Trump did was, essentially, and I hate to compare him to Hitler because so many people do all the time. It's such an old way of comparing him.
Mussolini, maybe?
Yeah. Well, no, because Hitler was a master of marketing, right? If you ever read Mein Kampf,
1938.
If you ever read Mein Kampf, you understand, this dude was a master marketer. He could market any idea, you know what I mean? And that's basically, he took very, very simplistic images, very simplistic statements, and applied them over a broad range and got people excited. And I see that's some of what Trump has done in a less aggressive manner, in a more, he has maybe a subtle message of nationalism until I guess he came out. He just came out and said he was a nationalist. Yeah. And I don't know if he knows what that really means when he says that.
That can mean a whole lot of different things.
It can mean a whole lot, but it only means one thing when the president says that. So, if he said that and didn't know exactly what he was putting across, well, it's just one more point to rack up that he's a dumbass.
Well, yeah, definitely knew his target audience, both Trump.
You know who?
And what's scary about his target audience is he's winning.
You know who we should compare Trump to, though? I'm so tired of hearing the Mussolini and Hitler saying
Solid.
Huey Long.
No, Ozzy Osbourne.
He might tell John facts. I don't think Trump's ever done that.
No, but that's a touche. Has Ozzy Osbourne ever looked smart in an interview?
I don't know.
But he's a genius artist and performer. And so
Yeah, so like he's got this thing.
Has an ear. Ozzy Osbourne knows how to get on stage and knows how to get 80,000 people chanting and that's exactly what Trump does. You know, if you wrote Ozzy Osbourne, if he went out and campaigned and played concerts and put his name on a ticket in a country, would he win? Working people love him. You know, and I think that's the real comparison. And I got so frustrated during the 2016 election when Democrats kept saying, this guy is an idiot. And I'm like, no, he's a weird genius. And they kept underrating him. And then they're like, oh, we're going to win the House and the Senate, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And I predicted a year ago exactly how it was going to turn out. I'm not tooting my own horn here, but the point is we keep underrating why he's winning.
Well,
he's winning because he's an artist, not because he's an intellectual.
We've had this conversation where we kind of feel like the left is a little responsible for Trump being president because, you know, with the whole Bernie Sanders thing, like, you know, Bernie, I don't care what anybody says, like Bernie Sanders had me gassed up. You know, I was pro Bernie, and then all of a sudden it was like he just drops out of the race.
He lost at that point.
Well, okay, so he lost at that point. But how in the hell did that? I mean, that's all anybody was talking about. It was almost like he was the pop star during that campaign.
Well,
and maybe it's a bias that I'm saying.
It definitely was a populist election, and I can harken to some. A lot of it had to do with
Sanders is a nationalist too. Sorry to say it, but I mean, we use that word like it's scary, and it is in a way. It's got a bad history, but I think sometimes there's a sense in which we forget that there's.
I don't know. I don't know about Bernie Sanders' foreign policy.
You didn't have one.
It wasn't as developed.
No, you didn't have one.
But I think a lot of why Sanders lost had to do with why the Democratic Party has lost in a lot of places, and that's a top-heavy leadership that doesn't necessarily allow state parties and county parties the resources they need because they've been so focused on, top of the tickets and everything like that. Here in Indiana, for example, Bernie won Indiana, fair and square, like 60-40. He did very well. He received less delegates in the final convention from Indiana because of superdelegates. Here in Elkhart County, it was like 60-40 as well, but our county chair was also a superdelegate. And despite the fact that Elkhart County went 60-40, her vote went to Hillary Clinton. Since then, we've tried to address that situation. At state conventions, anyone can sign up to be a delegate and go vote for these things. Just this past state convention in May, we passed a lot of progressive motions for the state party to adopt, and they have. Limiting the role of superdelegates in Indiana. They have to be tied to the popular vote now. I don't know if it's necessarily by their district, but I think it might be. As well as endorsing Medicare for all.
And you said that's in place in Indiana now.
Yeah. That we did just
this
convention.
That's a two-edged sword, but we'll see how that works.
Yeah. As well as, a host of other progressive issues, which I'm happy to see.
Wasn't the superdelegate system developed after Mondale?
No, it was
act against another Mondale.
68.
Yeah.
Was that Mondale was 84.
Okay. No, who was
Humphrey?
Who was the 68 candidate?
Humphrey. Was Humphrey the one there? All right.
I don't know.
But I know it was the 68 election that led to the. And honestly, if Republicans had a superdelegate system,
they wouldn't have gotten Trump.
I don't think they would have either.
They would have gotten
Isaac probably.
Yeah.
Isaac.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't even know how to pronounce his name.
Right.
John.
John.
But
we're going to let John.
The 2016 election would have been Humphrey. I think it would have been a very interesting 2016 election had it been Sanders and Trump. I think both of them would have galvanized the base in ways that Hillary definitely was not able to do. Because I would have voted for Sanders here in Indiana, despite the fact that my vote likely wouldn't have counted. So it's interesting what if situation who would have won between the two of them.
Yeah, and we'll never know, unfortunately. I wanted to come back to when we're done talking politics here for a minute. I keep thinking about that John Stuart Mill quote, and I wanted to bounce it off of him.
Okay.
So you said several times, and you said it in your response video, that there's certain ideas that we'll never learn from.
Okay.
And that makes sense to me in a way, but one of my favorite free speech quotes of all time is that I hope I'm right that it's John Stuart Mill, one of the Enlightenment thinkers, but it's that he that knows only his own side knows little of that, or his side of an argument knows little of that. And so the idea is that even when an idea is really firm, like slavery, we benefit from understanding why people supported it. Like I had a class in college where the professor went through the religious arguments for slavery. It was fascinating. I'd never seen it the way I did after that. And it really helped me understand history in a different way and have compassion in a different way for, all kinds of parts of history that I didn't understand at all. And it kept it from being so two-dimensional, because it's so easy for us to look back in history and go, boy, those were two-dimensional villains. But nobody's two-dimensional villains. That's kind of where the Church of England just was so huge to me when I made the video I did, is that it wasn't two-dimensional villains that were persecuting pilgrims. It was smart, wise, intelligent people.
That's a very good point.
Moral people.
And you just going back to slavery, we mentioned earlier the need to understand and realize historical preferences or prefaces of it. You have the cotton gin that came around at the turn of the century. You have these massive plantations that needed slaves in order to function. And from a purely economic function at the time, there wasn't technology that existed that could really do it the way that they needed it to happen and still be functional. At the same time, even understanding that, if at the time in the 19th century, I could understand the argument more so. Not that it would be right, but I could see that their perspective. But with the way technology is now, and the way the society has changed and adapted and evolved, I don't necessarily think that if someone came up to me and said, we need, slavery so we could have, more workers in the fields of California to help, pick produce and things like that, because we're having such a shortage of workers and things like that there. There's an easy counter argument there, and you don't have to deal with the necessary evils that slavery entails. I could go to anti-Semitism as well. In the Middle Ages and after that, Jews were the only ones that could really lend money and things like that. And so there was a lot of hatred towards the community, and they were segregated and things like that. And I can understand why communities would be upset. These are people who don't have this, same customs as you and things like that.
History, all of a sudden you understand why Jews are tied into popular imagination to banking. So then you understand where some of these stereotypes come in, and then you understand, this isn't because it's some secret cabal of Zionists. This is because there's a cultural and big history.
So let me reel this back real quick. Okay. So basically, let's go back to the slavery conversation now. Okay. So I guess what we're talking about, right, is how the North. There was two different views on the positions, right, in the abolishment of slavery. So the North is kind of like, you can't have slaves. That's wrong, right? But at the same time, it's the story of succession, right? Where the South was like, you're not representing our agricultural culture.
And part of it
correctly, and that was their excuse for seceding. Am I correct?
And I hate to make the pro-slavery argument here, but I think once I understood it, it made some of this history make sense to me, where they saw the capitalism that you saw in London and in the coal mines and in New England as far more immoral. They're like, we feed our employees, we care for them, we have a legal obligation for their health care, we have a legal obligation, and we know that if we beat them, they don't work as hard. We care for them. Up there, you give them a wage they can't live on, and they starve in the streets. And understanding where the historical development comes in, I think, helps you understand, you know what I'm saying? I just think that sometimes it's easy to say, oh, well, there could never be a good argument for something. Don't take me wrong, I'm not saying there's good arguments for slavery, but I'm saying understanding both sides of an argument, you get a two-dimensional picture. And if all of a sudden there's hate speech laws, I can't say the history that I just said.
Well, okay, so
Because that was hate speech.
let me just say, so going off the hate speech thing, that goes back to free speech. I mean,
That's my point.
Yeah, it kind of goes. We're coming back around here. So basically, whenever we talk about understanding ideas, right? You should, if you have an idea, the first thing you do is read the opposition of your idea.
That's the John Stuart Mill point.
Right. Is you read the opposition so you can understand where they're coming from. You can understand how to, if it comes out in the end that it is actually a bad idea, now you have a way and an understanding to dismantle it by its own definition, right? And that's where I guess my argument for free speech comes in, because if I can't, because if there's no, okay, so I can take any subject and I can read on it, right? And then I can read the opposition of that subject. Right.
But if we have hate speech laws, you can't read.
Right. If you have hate, right. And now, and what we're talking about is no longer books. With the growth of technology, we're talking about interacting online, articles, blogs, podcasts, stuff like that.
But including books.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a big book reader. You know that. But without having those, then how do we come to terms with being able to, like, again, we're back to that mechanism.
No. I
like your vaccine shirt is a great one.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can you turn towards the camera so you can read.
I love this shirt here.
So I'm pretty confident that the next time Aaron comes over, we're going to talk about vaccines.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example where understanding why the anti-vax claim is wrong, and I don't want to get into it right now because that's a long subject, but is essential to understanding why vaccines are important. And I don't think you could actually convey to people the whole vaccine story without explaining to them why people don't like them, why those positions are wrong. That's the whole John Stuart Mill quote. If you only understand your side of the story, you don't understand it very well.
No,
Right.
And
that's my fundamental problem with hate speech laws, is that they limit my ability to understand both sides of the story.
I agree, but I also think that it should be careful in some ways, because while we can research these things, we could read books, we could.
Yeah, let's keep in mind you're talking about rational human beings right here. So I'm gonna give you that. Like, when we're talking about what our ideas are on this. I mean, we're thinking about rational, logical thinking people, when obviously that does not account for the entire population.
I think that, yeah,
No,
exactly.
but it's also pretty elitist to think that some group of people can decide what ideas that the unwashed masses can have. That scares the shit out of me.
Well, I think we can all generally say that we can have these pieces of information, and we could know where to read them, we could know where to find them, but giving people the platform necessarily to stand there and recruit people for these organizations by saying these hate speech things isn't giving them a way, isn't trying to figure out, I don't know how I can phrase this right, isn't researching it. It's giving them a platform to
articulated the Church of England's position against the Pilgrims quite well. You can hold these opinions in your head, just attend my church, and don't disseminate them, and don't proselytize. And you know what? The Church of England was right. They let those ideas disseminate, and the Church of England is very tiny, and the descendants of Pilgrim thought is very big.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is true. It's a way of containing power.
But at the same time, the Pilgrims weren't, yelling for genocide. They weren't yelling for segregation, for all these things that we know from a historical, standpoint are terrible things. So while
we have the foresight, because what we're saying is we're so much smarter than the elders of the Church of England that we won't make the mistakes that people have made repeatedly throughout history.
I think we have.
We won't give time lock to Socrates. We won't. We're so developed that we're not going to make these human problems. That's the part where I'm like.
I think in some ways we're doing better because we live in a representative democracy. We have, the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. Things like that couldn't have existed necessarily.
Women's rights.
women's rights,
But
LGBTQ
are we going to
rights.
freeze it here? Because that's what hate speech would do.
No, I think what where we're at is trying to decide how.
Sorry, I'll back up.
No, I think what we're trying to decide is how to move forward in that, and still keeping those same values with
Me
us.
too. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And especially like we've already crossed the threshold. I mean, in my heart, we crossed the threshold of the LGBTQ community. We've crossed that threshold, but now we're at this threshold of one being transgender movement. And several other smaller issues. But I guess my concern is I'm back to the mechanism again. Like, I just don't know what we can use to continue to have that conversation, because I mean we have been historically, like you just said, historically we have gotten better over time. We talk
better because of this mechanism.
Right, exactly. We've gotten better as a culture, and I can only speak for this culture because there's a lot of bad cultures out there, in my opinion. Specifically the Islamic State. I mean, that's probably the most brutal one I can think of right now that has any kind of significance as far as population. So, like, you're talking about where free thought isn't even North Korea and the Islamic States. Where free thought, right? Free thought isn't even, you don't even have any control over your thought. And so I guess, and politically, we go back and look at this whole thing politically.
We just saw what happens if you commit hate speech against Prince Saud.
Yeah.
You get cut up in pieces.
But at the same time,
we're going to edit your name right out of this video. No.
But we also have to consider, like I mentioned a bit earlier, the safety of these communities. Because I think everyone has a right to live in a community without feeling persecuted, without feeling fear walking down the street. How do we ensure that these people feel welcome and they feel like members of the society and not,
Quite frankly, I don't feel that most of the time.
What's that?
Welcome and included and stuff. I mean, I live most of my life. I mean, I'm a privileged white guy, but there's a million reasons why a working class privileged white guy, air quotes, whatever, it doesn't feel that. I don't know a group of people. Like, I fully appreciate, I want everybody to be as welcome and as happy as they can. But to me, it has to be universalizable. Like, what operational principle can we say every human has a right to X? So how do we make every human have a right to not feel marginalized?
Well, I think
You know what I'm saying?
we're headed that way, and that question may be way further down the road in the conversation, right? But and that's kind of what I was getting at. Historically, we have gotten better at doing this.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think we're headed in the right direction. But but it comes back to our, what are we willing to sacrifice to have the right of free speech? What are we willing to platform? How do we recognize these ideas before they get platformed? Like, what are some of the safeguards that need to go in place? Like, I don't know what those safeguards are, and I doubt anybody else does, because there's no other mechanism in place that will work in the way that this has worked.
Yeah.
Right, and being able to come to enlightenment, to transcend our ideas, and just become better as people. But this whole time, and we look back over history, and we talk about slavery, we talk about Nazis, we talk about women being marginalized in our culture. These things have gotten better, and there's a lot of sacrifices along the way that were made in order for that to happen. You know what I mean? So I don't think that we can discount the bad stuff that has to happen. It's kind of like Nietzsche or even Sam Harris when you look at the moral landscape. Like, you have your peaks and you have your valleys. And I think that really is true for everything. So in any idea, we talk about free speech, you have your peak where we have a good solid, good idea of what free speech should be. The ideas that we're talking about, those are the ones we want to platform. Like, we just find this a superior way. Right? And then the value of that is, we're completely stupefied by bad ideas and let them run rampant. Okay? But there has to be some mechanism that allows us to navigate between those two.
And I see that it's basically like a meme evolution, that bad ideas, given long enough, don't last. They just never do.
I mean, hopefully that's true. But if you look at institutionalized racism, if you look at
Well, and that's a new thing, though. I mean, if you think about, I know it's not a new thing in the culture, but it's a new thing to the general conversation. So,
no, I agree. But ideas like anti-Semitism and slavery, these ideas have existed for necessarily thousands of years, and that while we're working to get them better, and we're getting rid of a lot of it, they haven't gone away. Sometimes they get quieter. Sometimes, society in the world.
Yeah, I thought we were past this whole racist thing when Dr. Dre signed Eminem.
I thought that was
a big cultural step, I think, in America. I mean, I said it before in another podcast. I still stand by it. Yeah, and when Obama was up, these were great leaps forward, I think, in solidarity. And then, but then we're answered with things like Trump, which is it's like two steps forward.
But once again, we go back to your 72 years. Like, we're talking about a 14-year period, and we're like, oh my God, the yo-yo. And it's like, is this little tiny bits of noise in a sloped line? And that's kind of where I'm going, is that what we're doing is working. Don't fix what's not broken.
But it is working, and okay. So yeah, I think, and that's kind of what I was saying, is that overall,
if you look over the last 200 years, the line's one direction.
Oh yeah, there's a fantastic book called Better Angels of Our Nature.
Stephen
Pinker. Yeah. And that just goes into such detail on how we pretty much live in the most peaceful period of existence.
And that was my point about the one person. It wasn't heartless. It's just that, like, bad things are going to happen. And if you look at the worst thing that happened in Elkhart last year, it was bad. Every little burg. But yet, overall, we live in a good world.
So have you read Enlightenment Now yet?
I have not.
Okay, I'll send you home with the book today.
All right.
So you got to check it out, because I had this I wouldn't say a depressed or a gloomy look at how things were, but after reading that book, it made me feel a lot better about the time that I get to witness in human evolution. You know what I mean? Just like we are in a place where we wouldn't, even 20 years ago, we just said 20 years ago, we wouldn't even dream of having this type of information at our fingertips, walking around, this AI extension we hold in our hands every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is AI. We just haven't figured out how to put it in us yet. But, I think that's something that we need to think about when we think about how free speech has been a great utility and a great tool for us.
Have we all here read On Liberty by John Stuart Mill?
No.
I don't think so.
We're doing. He does a way better job talking about it, but he basically goes into hate speech in detail and why it's impossible to do correctly. And that's coming from a generation where what essentially hate speech is everywhere. Now, I don't remember the term, but he uses it's not hate speech.
But we can't go around. Okay, so this is important to say. Like, we can't go around that every time something that is said that offends somebody else, we automatically go hate speech. You know what I mean? Because I don't think that's the case. I think it's misinformed speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's ignorant speech. But it's hard to
need the right to offend people.
It's hard, right? I mean, you have
to. Very effective man.
And he said, Christopher Hitchens said, you have, we have the right to free speech, like you have the right to be offended. You know what I mean? Yeah, be offended. That's fine. You know what I mean? That's just a part of living in the culture that we've propagated. So I guess I lost my thought.
Oh yeah, I agree. We definitely need the right to be offensive, but at the same time, I think there's a threshold that is dangerous to cross.
Who can regulate that?
That's a good question. I don't know.
That's what I asked
before. And historically, we haven't.
Who gets to decide what we can talk about? And you think about that.
In the past, it's been the Supreme Court.
What I worry about is whoever does this is not going to be representative of vulnerable people. It's going to be representative of people with power that are able, that are smart. It's not going to, like, my voice won't be at that table. It's going to only be an elitist voice. And look at what elitist voices have gotten us into past: scientific racism, the church being blamed, you know, fascism was an elitist idea, you know, all of these things. Like, it's not like the smartest among us always have good ideas, historically.
That's true. In the past, I think, if you look at it, when there have been regulations on free speech, it's come from, things like call to arms. You can't yell, fire in a crowded movie theater, stuff like that.
The Danish cartoon.
Yeah.
Sound rusty.
I mean,
yeah, but you know the court case that started the fire in a crowded theater?
I did not.
Okay, so it was a bunch of Yiddish communists that were fleeing Europe before World War I, saying that Europe's about to explode into a war, and we're warning people and frightening people and passing out anarchist brochures, when Europe was about to explode into a war, and the Supreme Court upheld the ability to put them in prison because they were speaking truth to power when nobody wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
And Chris Hitchens goes into this in detail in a few videos. There's one that he does where he talks about it, and he actually yells into a theater audience, "Fire!" Now you've heard me do it. I just yelled fire in a crowded theater, And
I was just answering who has in the past.
But literally, that court case was oppressing communist Jews.
Yeah.
So it's not like the smartest among us get this right in the past.
Well, no, and I think
And we always go, but you can't do that. And it's like, so we want to oppress smart Jewish communists that are right about where history's going next time?
Well, I've asked this question before. How is it that we don't have any real intellectuals as leaders in our country? Right? These are like pseudo-intellectuals.
Lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers. Yeah, good.
Usually.
But and that boils back to the way we publicize every detail of say the president's life, or and anybody who's getting high. Any smart guy doesn't want the entire country prying into every little single detail of the personal business. You know what I mean? So I think it would be nice to have smarter people in play who are really generally concerned about the well-being of mankind.
I definitely agree. I think just this past election cycle, there was 8 or 9 scientists. One, I think, formerly worked for NASA that just got elected to Congress. And it was,
there was a whole page. There was like actually, now I'm going to put my foot in my mouth because I just seen this whole list of, I think it was scientists and intellectuals that actually ran for offices. Whether they got it or not, beyond me. But it was a whole,
but that's also where I'm unfortunately not as on board with thinking that even scientists have the solution. Because who was the biggest collection of scientists paid by our government to solve a problem this century that is unclassified? Well, the Manhattan Project did a great job. Humanity was the worst problem yet. So it's not like the smartest among us. I mean, you can't say that Obermeyer and Friedman and all of these people weren't the smartest people among us in their time.
Yeah, well, personally, I'm one who stands on the side that the atomic bomb has led to, the most peaceful period of human existence. I mean, there was a risk, of course, that, we could have annihilated ourselves, which is still days now, but we made it through, and I think...
But I don't think you could say that ethically we should have opened that Pandora's box. Was that an ethical decision to make at the time?
Well, no, it wasn't an ethical decision to make at the time.
I think it was.
Drop the bomb?
I think it was the right choice.
That's interesting.
I just read a book.
We'll get into that in another podcast. Yeah, that's a different podcast.
I have some reading material for you before we get into that one.
I really want to hear that because I've often wondered what the other side of that coin was, but we won't get into it.
I know both sides of that coin.
Yeah,
I have an opinion on it, but yes.
So I think we're getting close to time here. I think we've been going for about an hour and a half, 2 hours now. Hour and a half.
Is there anything that you wanted to say that we've interrupted you on? Because I'm notorious about it.
No, it's fine. No, just that I agree on a lot of points. I just want to emphasize the need for marginalized people to feel safe in their communities and to feel welcome, which I know isn't always necessarily a thing that can happen, but I don't think anyone, at least in America, deserves to live in fear of their neighbors. Now, how to regulate that and how to properly ensure that ideas can be propagated without suppressing them, while also maintaining say community. I'm not sure how to do that.
Civil discourse.
Civil discourse, that's the way to go.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
To me, that's
But can you be civil with some of these?
Yes.
and can some of these people be civil with you? I mean, it goes back and forth. So I mean, I think when you get into, and that's my fear, is like we've come to this point where we've been telling each other on both sides of this political spectrum, you can't say this, you can't say that. You know, it's like Nickelodeon, you can't do that on television. You know what I mean? It's almost pathetic to me at this point. So it's just like, what do you mean I can't say something? Right? Like, I get it. Like, I'm not going to be some guy that goes out and attacks somebody because of their religious belief, or because of their, you know, their race, or right. I get it, but, and I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but I think, as we were just talking about a minute ago, historically, we've gotten better at being us and at coexisting with new ideas, with old ideas that we may have thought was stupid before. But we've only gotten there through civil discourse, through free speech. I would say free speech via civil discourse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a big and a fair constraint to put on free speech.
When discourse gets sufficiently uncivil, I think that we all have a need to quit talking to that person. There's a local activist in this area that we all probably know, won't mention him, but you can find him on the local newspaper page every day.
Yeah, but I love
yelling
it.
and screaming at people.
But I love it.
Okay, and that's fine. But I'm just saying that makes extremists. That, if you want to produce extremists, that's how you make them. And that to me is part of our challenge, is to make sure that we have civil discourse and we're not.
So I guess what it comes down to, and I'm gonna blow our heads up here just a little bit. There's guys like us sitting around, right, and able to have conversations about whether it be conflicting ideas or whatever. But you know, at the same time, you know, letting people see that this is just a conversation. This is something that we can talk about. That there doesn't have to be any hate rhetoric in it. There doesn't have to be any personal attacks in it. You know, you're not better than me. I'm not better than you. Like, just, you know, that's one of the reasons I think videos like this are so important. So,
you know, we're all guilty of that on Facebook, because it's such a disconnect of, you know, talking to someone on Facebook from sitting down and having a conversation with them. You're just, you know, you wake up to, you know, a buzz on your phone and you see something like,
well, it's so easy.
I can't believe somebody said that. And you're like,
or when you're like, you know, or like when your kid flushes a spoon down the toilet, you're just having a bad day. You just see the thing, you're like, you know what? Fuck you, you dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's so easy to do. I talked to Calvin about this quite a bit, that because we have a group chat with this, like 5 of us in there, 4 I think now, but the conversations get really heated in there sometimes, and I'll just disappear from that conversation for a couple days because I can't think in those terms. Like, I have, you know, I have to step back and kind of regather my thoughts and come back and attack the conversation in a rational way. And I think that's a great tool that, you know, a lot of people probably could benefit from. You know what I mean? So
I had to spend most of the last week, and I do this frequently, deliberately avoiding the news, not listening to radio while I drove. I went and downloaded a couple of spy novels and just engulfed myself in spy novels, because sometimes I just listen, and next thing I know, just pissed off.
you need to read P.G. Woodhouse.
Yeah?
Yeah, get you some audio. If you like audiobooks, get P.G. Woodhouse. Get the P.G. Woodhouse collection on Amazon Audible. I mean, the voiceover is beautiful. It's great. P.G. Woodhouse is probably one of the best wielders of the English language that you'll ever read. And it's so fun. You ever read that? You have to check it
I have
out.
this guilty pleasure of reading like really crappy spy novels.
What's the last thing you guys have read?
What is the last thing I read?
It was Rayman series by who is it?
Stephen King or Stephen
Stephen
Hawking's new book.
But before that, it was I just finished Renegade History.
Germs and Steel.
Guns, Germs, and Steel. Yeah,
You mostly read nonfiction?
mostly nonfiction. Mostly, I'm a huge war buff. I read tons of war history. Just got done with a book. I could look it up on my phone, but it's about the entire story of the Hiroshima bomb. it's probably the 20th book I've read. I love Special Forces. I've probably read every Special Forces book out there, but you know, I just love history. World War II. I think I read like 10 World War IIs in the last 3 months.
Woodhouse is probably the only fiction I read. It's
I didn't used to read fiction at all.
for me it's a tool.
Yeah.
So like I read so much serious shit all the time. You know, Christopher Hitchens is one of my favorite authors. I read a lot of dog.
Yeah, I think I've read everything that Hitchens ever wrote.
Yeah.
Everything Dawkins wrote.
Yep.
Everything Harris ever wrote.
We're on the same reading list here.
I need to catch up.
We've been working for Nietzsche.
So with this,
gone through Mill.
so that's what PG House, PG Woodhouse is to me. It's a chance to step back and kind of relax from that staunch reading list that I have. You know, but yeah. So is there anything else that you guys wanted to say tonight? I mean, we want to have you back because obviously we talked about conversation.
We don't always agree. I know that I've been guilty of this to you a few times, so I apologize.
That's okay. I probably have as well.
We've hit a couple times here where it's like, okay, we need to talk about that. It's a whole other podcast. So I think it'd be great, you know, when we revisit the video,
And the only way that I learn more about my ideas and good ideas, listening to people that have a smart take on the opposite view of something, which is why it's so much fun talking, because we have a slight difference of opinion, and when I hear you talk, I have to go, boy, you made a good point there, and I have to think, sometimes I don't have a reply, and it's really good, and then you have to go back and dig deeper.
Oh,
And that's one of the things I actually love about Nietzsche in general. It really pisses you off. And that's part of why I love the idea of free speech.
But it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes either.
He makes good sense.
It makes great sense when he makes good sense. It makes great sense, but when he doesn't, he doesn't. That's with most philosophers.
Yeah.
So, man, it was great. I'm so glad that you were able to make it out and have this conversation. And
enjoy, Aaron.
Yeah. If you guys, you know, again, if you want to hear more of this content, if you like what you heard here today, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Again, go look for us on Facebook. We're Out of the Armchair /podcast. -podcast. I'm Sam. This is Calvin and our friend Aaron. And thanks for joining us today. All right.
Be nice to each other.
We will see you later.